Hello, my name is Jon Harris, and I work for the University of New Mexico, and today I'm going to be actually talking about vCloud Automation Center and the power of custom properties that are built into vCAC. I only got a couple slides here. I'm going to do a couple stuff around that slides, kind of explain what vCAC is and the different components, and then kind of dive into what custom properties are and just some applicable, some use cases for that. So vCAC, here's kind of an overview of how the application is actually laid out. As you can see here on the screen, with vCAC, there's a core, vCAC core, and then there's an integration and distribution layer. Within the web application layer, there's basically 4 components. Within that, there's the self-service website. This is like that easy button user interface that you want to be able to present to your users. So they got that Amazon or that shopping cart type feel to it. There's the reports website. That's exactly what it is. It's a reporting website that you use to gather reports around chargeback and chargeback and allocations and things of that sort. There's the portal website UI, and that's used for configuration of the application. There's the model manager, so that's your web layer. You've got your application layer. Application layer is where the manager service sits. So the manager service is the service that communicates with all the different other components. And the model manager piece that sits there on top, it basically brokers all the connections from the web UI or the portal web UI down to the manager service. And then you have what we call the DEM workers, which are the distributed execution managers. So there's 2 different flavors of those. There's one that's called the DEM orchestrator. What the DEM orchestrator does is it goes through and it knows about all the business workflows and the the workflows that are used to generate your VMs and approval policies. And what it does is it does like a debug or pre-flight check before those workflows are executed, sends the information over to what we call the distributed execution manager, which is those DEM workers, and they actually orchestrate the workflow. They go through and do the work. Then there's a SQL database. Database layer is what it is. This is all run on a web app, a Windows platform at this point. So it is what it is. I believe that's going to probably change in the future. And then there's also the vCenter agents. So what the agents do is those are agents that you set out there, and their primary goal is to connect to your different components, like a vCenter, like a VCD, which end up being your endpoints that sit over to the right. And they handle the connection to those things. They go do a scan, and they bring all the information, say, about the vCenter in there, which ends up being compute resources in vCAC that you can deploy resources to. So those end up being like your resource buckets, the endpoints. So now you have to ask, what are custom properties? So within vCAC, what custom properties are basically properties or attributes that can be applied to blueprints or what they call build profiles. And so the real power behind these is the fact that there's all these predefined properties or attributes within vCAC, and you're able to leverage those during your deployment of VMs. So what you can do is you can either apply them to a blueprint, and a blueprint in vCAC is pretty much like a template that you have out there that you want to wrap in policy and settings, so that when you go and a customer clicks on it, it takes all those settings and it applies it to that VM and customizes it for their needs as it's deployed into the environment. And so what a build profile is generally you're going to use those if you've got a big list or set of custom properties that you want to turn around, that you want to be able to tie to multiple blueprints. So you can take those, for instance, like at UNM, we had some things where we had issues around security, and we had business processes internally where we had to ask people questions. Are you putting sensitive data on this network? Are you going to comply to this policy, right? So we needed a way to be able to take that information and bundle it and be able to gather it, or at least have them acknowledge it before they hit the button so we can make them accountable. So through custom properties in vCAC, I was able to put that on the form as they were provisioning and force them to do that. The other thing that you can do is, for instance, like in vCAC, and I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes what we've done with that is you can go and you can take some of the predefined ones, like this virtual machine network name, and that allows me to basically either predefine the port group or VLAN that I'm going to put that VM on, or you can even present them with a drop-down menu and allow them to select where that is going to go. So UNM is like really old school because we've had this network forever. UNM was there before private addressing was there and that public space was there. So we still have like a public network and a private network, and there's no NAT in the environment. So we had to find a way to not make it so that provisioning out was when users would go and provision VMs out, that we didn't have to have this manual talking back and forth that would have to happen to be able to provision the VM and decide where it was going to land. So what we were able to do was we were able to give the option of a drop-down menu where the customer could select a private or public network during the provisioning of the VM, and then based on the option that they selected, it would be put into a specific network, IP'd statically, automatically, and then provisioned into their environment. Things like the AD cleanup. I have that in the profile, and that handles the rest of the VM lifecycle. When I go and I delete a VM from vCAC, it goes and deletes that VM from Active Directory and purges it out of the OU so that you don't have all these stale computer objects sitting in Active Directory. Network profile. So the network profile is how I can actually go in and I can specify a subnet in vCAC. Give all the information about that subnet, the subnet mask, the IP, the DNS, the Win servers, the gateway, and be able to give it a range of IP addresses. And then what I can do is I can tie that to my deployment. So yet again, when I go and I provision a VM in vCAC, it gets an IP off that IP range, and it's all automatic. So it's automagical. So as you can see, vCAC can be a very, very cool tool. And the custom properties do some very cool things. So I kind of wanted to give you an overview here and kind of show that this is actually the end user UI that the end users ends up getting. So when they browse to vCAC, they get this is that easy button interface I was talking about. I mean, us as technical people, we look at things like vCloud Director and we're like, that's cool. We're virtual guys, and now we can play with the network. We can automate it. We're networking guys now. But you know what? Customer doesn't care about that. They care about clicking on something, being able to decide how much they want a CPU memory, storage, click a button and be able to provision a VM on the fly, right? So with vCAC, I can present this to my customers. Where's my mouse? And I can click on blueprints or new requests. So if I click on either of those, at UNM to start, just because of some internal business issues, we've decided we've got 4 different blueprints we're going to present to the customers, different tiers and sizes of storage. But as you can see here, now I can go and I can click on one of these blueprints and requesting machine. It's going to bring up a machine here, and as you can see, the users get a very user-friendly UI that they can go into. So there's a general settings here. And so another cool thing is, and I haven't even touched on it, and I know I've got very little time, is vCAC has its own built-in VM lifecycle, right? So you have the ability to go ahead and have leases on your VMs and have them purged automatically and have archives tied to them. So you can have it so that a customer, right, they go and they provision a VM, and you can even give them a lease range. You can allow them to select anywhere from 30 to 365 days on a slider if you wanted to. They select what they want, and then after that time frame, you can have an archive set on there so that it shuts down the VM, keeps it for 30 days, so you're not having to pull that from backup because some developer forgot to go and renew their lease, VM goes away, and then you're stuck in this crazy scenario where you're trying to get this thing from backup. But anyways, so in our environment to start, we had a virtual hosting service, so what we did is we set that to indefinite, and our customers at this point, they want a VM and they want to keep it. But then we also have the ability here, so we've given them the ability to go 1 to 8 vCPUs. That could be something different. I suspect in the future, vCAC at this point already has a really cool built-in approval policy. So I suspect what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that if you want over 8 vCPUs, there's an approval policy that's triggered. We just want to kind of rein that in and make sure people aren't getting crazy and causing all sorts of problems on the infrastructure because they go and they look at some document about some application that says they need like 32 vCPUs or something crazy. They go and they provision that, and then we're causing all sorts of problems. Same with the memory. So they have the ability to go in here and they can select memory, and it's all on, I mean, it's click and drag, as you can see. The description really is what it is. It's a description. When you put information in that description field, it gets sent into the database, and that stays with that VM as it's actually provisioned. So I'm just going to call it the app. Reason for the request. So that ties to that request policy. So if in our environment, vCAC did have this one limitation to start, is that it would not actually present the customer what the cost before they actually hit the submit button. It was kind of crazy. It was like this range, right? So what we've done is we've been able to go and custom make our, they have these email templates in there, right? So we've been able to customize those email templates so the approver gets an email and all the costs are in that email. And so when they look at that email, they click a link, they go to the approval site and they hit submit, they hit accept, and they still get, you know, so we were able to build around the process. But VMware is working very hard to address those issues in this coming version. Additional settings. So this is where we did a lot of custom property stuff here. So at the University of New Mexico, we like to be able to have people go in and be able to name their own machine. But we have an AD naming convention, and we expect people that go through this training to know what that is. But what we've done is we provided them with a field where they can go in and name the machine themselves, but information where they can look and go to the site and validate, hey, this is what the policy is and this is what we expect of you. So in this field, I can go and I can do ABC. I'm just gonna, I should probably click on the field, shouldn't I? I'm just gonna put a name in here. And then another issue that we had at UNM is, so when a Windows VM gets provisioned, it gets put into AD DNS, right? But we have this UNM namespace. That sits in bind. Those don't know about each other. So today, that's a manual process, and we have a manual workflow that goes with that. But at minimum, we wanted to be able to gather that information while the user was provisioning so that we can put it in a ticket and so that it gets done until we can get that piece automated. We're looking at doing things with info blocks and stuff that have some really good integration, but we're not there yet. So we had to, that was the thing that we chose not to automate, but we wanted to at least automate the gathering of that information. So yet again, this is a custom property, and I was able to put that information in there. I was able to give it a title, and I was able to give help text with it, right? So let me hover over this, come on. And then in that help text, it gives information about what you're trying to get from that customer. And you're able to present this. You have the control to do that and do it and word it however you want. So I'll go test.unm.edu. Same with port groups. With ports on the firewall. We had another scenario where, okay, yet again, we have this crazy security policy at UNM, right? And so when we first started this project, we're like, okay, somebody gets a machine and all they have is like AD and DNS, and they can't do file services, they can't do nothing else, they can't do web services. So we did multiple things. We adjusted internal policy to say, hey, if you're internally UNM, here's some default ports we're gonna leave open. If you're external, here's some default ports. And hey, by the way, yet again, let's gather the information while we're provisioning so that we can have that in a ticket. And then as we start moving to using things like NSX or vCloud Director, we should be able to automate those processes. And so it's, for every organization, it's gonna be different. When you first start out, you gotta pick out what you're gonna automate to start. So I'm just gonna put some random number in here. Network VLAN, this is what I was talking about before. So the customer has the ability to select the network port group that they're gonna be on. And when they select that network port group, that's associated with a reservation on their NICs that says, hey, use this network profile. You're going to get a static IP, and it's all done automatically in the background, and the customer doesn't have to worry. And by the way, the IP management built into vCAC tracks every one of those IPs and what machine has that IP. And then here's the crazy security things like, hey, you're not putting any FERPA or HIPAA data and things like that, and we force them to acknowledge that. If somebody doesn't actually populate information in one of these boxes, it doesn't allow them to provision, so they're stuck. They have to go and they have to abide by the policy. So as you can see, at a university, we have to deal with a lot of political junk, and so that's what we had to deal with. You have to work around your internal business processes. Another thing is we have index codes. That's how we bill our customers, right? So that's what our primary job is right now, is we're providing infrastructure for all these different departments around UNM, so we have to have a way to tie that to a billing. So we're able to gather that index code during the provisioning of the VM. So they can go in, they can fill in this field, put the information in there, and then at this point, they can hit submit, and what ends up happening is an email is triggered off, one to the person requesting, and they get this email, and this email says, hey, we're waiting for approval. Approver gets another email. That email says, hey, click on this link. They go in, they hit approve. VM spins up in the background, ends up in the appropriate OU for that customer, IP'd, on Active Directory, done, off to the races. I'm sure I'm probably getting pretty close to time here, so I'm going to go ahead and end it there. But if you want to know any more information about vCAC, definitely hit me up on Twitter. You can look, Jon Harris at NM, and you can also hit me up on my blog, which is virtuemaster.com. Thank you for your time.